Welcome to this channel. I'm Justin Hitt, the author and publisher of Prosperity Homestead. We're going to primarily talk about ecological and environmental ways that you can improve your property to increase property value, to increase your cash flow, and to ultimately create an environment that delivers to you food security. We will talk at times about your physical security and the ability to design your small farm or homestead so that you can get maximum value from it. Now, it's important that you get value from the land while not damaging the land. We want to actually create more value from the land that goes back into the land than we consume for ourselves, because this channel really is about you being a good steward of land. To give you a little background about myself, I have a permaculture design certification. I have a long interest in ecology and land management. I've worked on a number of trail restorations, conservation projects. I go from a scientific and practical approach. So for example, I have a piece of property that I'm managing. They were having a conservation biologist come out to provide input on the plan. So a lot of the things that I talk about here are not sensational. They're not about the latest trend. They're about the foundation of transforming distressed land into ecologically sound habitat. Now, why do we want ecologically sound habitat? First off, wildlife. If you're hunting, so deer, turkey, different types of animals have different habitats where they thrive. Part of that food security is having a thriving ecosystem. Now, again, if you're raising chickens, you don't want to be attracting foxes or raccoons or possums. But if you are in the business or you're in the hobby of hunting, you want to have bigger bucks. You want to have healthier breeding habitats, and you want to ultimately have a good game animal, something worth bragging about. Now, the same thing works on the fishing side. If you've got a pond, you want good quality bass, but in order to get a good quality bass, you need to have the bluegill, and you need to have the minnows, and you need to have even catfish sometimes, because that ecosystem of the pond is what facilitates the bigger, stronger bass. So there's a sporting element on it too. And if you're hunting duck, you can do duck blinds and duck areas. But I won't speak specifically on the hunting side because that's not my area of knowledge. I'll speak on the habitat side, on how you can create an oasis on your own property, starting even with degraded land. Now, a lot of folks think you got to have a lot of money to be doing these things, but I'll tell you, there are good old boys out there who have very little income, but they have a lifestyle that's far and beyond any working stiff could ever have. And if you desire some of that personal freedom, then you're in the right place, because I'll talk about that personal freedom, the ability to create systems that take care of themselves. That's what's beautiful about the ecology and environment, is that if the right elements are in place, the environment tends to sustain itself for long periods of time without any human interaction. But again, the permaculture training is going to talk about food forest. So we can cultivate and develop a food forest for the key sporting animals. And I don't know if I want to say sporting, because really it's a synergistic relationship with the environment, where you give to the environment and the environment provides plenty to you. Kind of a steward of God's blessing, or God's wonder of nature. So if you're from a pagan belief, by the way, I have a doctorate in divinity too. So the background, if you have a pagan belief system, the environment itself is actually an extension of your body, and you are in service to the environment. And as you are in service to the environment, that environment is providing for you. That's similar in Abrahamic religions as well, where we're a little more elevated as masters of the environment rather than another animal in the same habitat. But again, it's still about the stewardship. So you'll see some of those trends in there. So I may say things that spiritually make sense, but not make sense naturally. And I also may use parable to describe complex biological activities, because again, this is a channel for homeowners, people on homesteads and small farms, and it's not meant to you don't need to learn everything, because you're going to learn the majority of things when you get away from the computer screen and you go out in nature and actually do these things. So I'm going to encourage you to get out and hike, get out and do wildlife inventories, get out there and do some of the things that might be involved in the naturalist programs that you'll find in your state. But again, It's about that interaction with your land. Now, how much land do you need to have for this channel to really serve you? Well, 3 to 5 acres is fine, but many subscribers have 5 or more acres where they either live or this is land that they're going to retire to. So maybe it's a hunting property you've got. Maybe it's a piece of land that you've inherited. How can that land serve your family in both the short term and the long term? And you'll see videos about, for example, putting trails on your property and kind of establishing some primitive campsites so that you can go out and hike or bike, or you can go out and camp on that land, and you can start having those family experiences that bring together that physical and that mental security. So it is a holistic approach of health, wealth, and wisdom. Health as far as your family, yourself. Wealth as far as increasing the value of land so that it creates an abundance, not necessarily financial wealth, but it creates an abundance of food and nutrients for your family and for the wildlife of that particular area and region. And wisdom is that you would know the difference. Unfortunately, there are many people out there that advocate for climate change and they advocate for environmental this and environmental. They don't even know what nature looks like. They see it through a screen rather than seeing it in real life. And I did a video recently about an unnatural amount of butterflies in there. And that's kind of a play on words, because if you go to an arboretum or you go to a wild natural history museum and you see a butterfly exhibit, that's an unnatural number of butterflies. There aren't that many butterflies in a particular space because that space has been habitated as an enclosure to demonstrate. So they're cultivating the creatures there. However, you can do the same thing in a wildlife area or a wildflower area that you can attract bees and butterflies and beneficial insects and all these things and actually see more than would be normal to the environment. Yet some people are excited to see one monarch butterfly. I'm not satisfied with that because I know if you cultivate the soil, if you cultivate the diversity of plants, if you have the right pollinators and you reduce the amount of predators, you could see 5, 10, 15 monarchs as they migrate through an area. So for example, milkweed, and there's different plants that they have preference to. So in your own property, whether it's 5 acres or 500 acres, let's look at how we cultivate areas to transform that land into more of a park-like environment, because that's how the humans interact with the land, but also a wildlife preserve so that the natural elements can be expressed in that particular piece of land to have more deer, more turkey, more bear in some cases. There are large predators that will show up if your land is super healthy. But you got to know how to handle those things. You have to know how to be aware of them. So one example on a property I'm working on right now is that there are bear. And when I originally surveyed the land, it was so dense and definitely not a good habitat for humans to be, but okay for bear. And so by creating long trails that you can see down a contour, for example, or you can see down a property line, it gives the humans that are interacting on the land a heads up about bear activity, but it also gives the bear heads up about human activity because the bear itself doesn't want to interact with you. It's only going to attack or to interact when there is a fear of danger or a close proximity, like a surprise. So if I'm out there surveying under the heavy underbrush and I'm surveying in there and really just, I don't have a really far line of sight, the potential for me to come up on an animal that isn't happy about me being there or is surprised by me being there, which I don't know why they'd be surprised. I'm a pretty noisy walker, but ultimately, can you see how understanding these things are going to help you get more from your land? The permaculture zone concept works really well. We'll talk about that. The activity of making your land accessible and then having water on your land. So you may have a dry piece of land right now, but there are contours and earthworks systems that you can put in place to add water to your land, even if you only have seasonal rains. But ultimately, to start creating those oases. And now we're not going to talk about transforming 500 acres all at once. What we're going to do is 1 acre at a time, half acre at a time, quarter acre at a time, the garden right outside your back door at a time. Now, a lot of what I'm doing is in the temperate climate. So when I visit an arboretum or I visit a park or I visit someplace to do an on-location shoot, those locations are going to tend to be within a couple hours of where I live, and that is going to be a mid-Atlantic temperate climate on the east coast of the United States. So we have a little bit of pressure from the ocean, and we have a little bit of pressure from the mountain range, and so that's a typical environment that I'll show you examples of. However, the technology and the knowledge that I'm trying to help convey or to answer questions works well in desert environments such as Texas. It works well in more humid climates or wet climates like the UK. It even works in Australia, where they have a higher heat over time. But again, they are somewhat of a temperate tropical environment in different segments. So we can go into that in detail. Now, again, this channel is part of a newsletter, and I'm going to focus on the questions that newsletter subscribers have and the questions you have in the comments below. And this is very important. I don't really have an editorial calendar because I'm not running this as a for-profit business. I'm really looking just to break even. I'm looking to cover my editorial costs. You'll notice most of my videos are very low tech, at least low tech. But this red face that I've got here is, too much light from the front. Anyway, I'm going to try to do a lot of filming on location, which costs money. So what I'm going to ask of you, if you find this information useful and you find these resources help you implement environmentally friendly solutions in your own yard, solutions that create food security for your family, such as organic gardens and fruit areas and edge gardens, food forests. If you find this useful, like and subscribe. Okay, that tells the YouTube algorithm, that tells whatever platform this video is on, that this is valuable content, and they'll share it with other people. But I'd like you to go one step further. If you'll join our newsletter at www.prosperityhomestead.org/newsletter, if you'll join our newsletter, I will give you additional resources. I'll give you the access to ask questions, and I'll point you to tools and valuable items that you can use immediately to start creating and cultivating that environment that best serves your family. It really is about you and your family. As you cultivate a strong self and a strong family, you'll be able to be a contributor to your community, and what you'll find is this value extends. Now, you're going to have a lot of obstacles. Don't get me wrong. There's going to be people who don't understand what you're doing. I had a landscaper on a project that we're working on right now say, well, we're just going to put down some herbicide, and I had to address it differently. He's like, I'm going to put down some herbicide, then we're going to put down some grass, it'll be all good. I had to address it differently. And I first asked, well, do you have a herbicide? Do you have a chemical application license? Okay. So his mind is he's running a business. Do you have a chemical application license? No. Okay. Then we are not going to put down any of this stuff. And by the way, that stuff causes cancer. It's not necessary. You can mulch an area out and kill all the weeds. You don't need to spray it with anything. There are natural organic solutions that dissolve in the soil faster and that only kill the targeted plants. There are ways of changing soil pH, for example, to cause grass to grow faster and reduces the amount of broadleaf in a yard. So instead of educating him on those things, I basically started with where he's at, which is, do you have a license to apply that stuff? And he said no, so you're not applying it. That's just the way it works. It doesn't matter what my opinion is. You don't have a license, so don't apply it. Stuff isn't necessary. It's actually dangerous to your health. Now, of course, I can't control the next owner doing stuff one way or another, but the soil has life in it, and if you cultivate that life, you will get more of what you want. If you kill that life and see soil as just an inert vessel, then you'll have problems growing things. You won't get nutrients in your vegetables. You won't get that soil exchange that's necessary for rapid and quality growth. So again, I'm going to cover all these things, but we need to have more than 1,000 subscribers on the channel. So make sure you're subscribing to the channel on whatever platform this is, because that's going to give me enough questions that I can consistently deliver you new content. Because frankly, I'm not sitting around creating content all the time. I'm not a YouTuber. I'm not an influencer. I'm just a regular guy who happens to have a passion for permaculture. I have a passion for ecology. I have a passion for natural systems, and I have a passion for how humans interact with the world around them, and understanding that so that we have less inputs and greater abundance. And that, again, that land, if you can create per acre a greater abundance than that land needs to sustain, you will attract quality wildlife. You will attract situations where food is in abundance. You will attract those things that are necessary. But again, it's not just attraction. It's understand having the physical capacity to do the work. It's understanding what work is necessary, and then ultimately, what does conservation look like? What does a natural system look like? Now, once you get it to a natural system, it'll sustain itself forever. It'll take care. I don't really believe in the rewilding thing, but if you work with an environment, you can end up with a food forest that lasts for hundreds of years. You can end up with land that can be cultivated for thousands of years. Now, you won't be alive for thousands of years, but again, stewardship is about providing for your family, about providing for your future, about providing for your community. And if you can do this, it becomes the new culture of sustainability versus fear and persuasion and just people screaming about things that they would not recognize as being healthy in an environment. They don't understand the nature of the world. So let me just close with this. I gave you the example of an unnatural volume of butterflies. If you're in a temperate climate that has clear seasons, and you're only going to see those butterflies in the spring. Those flowers will be gorgeous in the spring. As you start moving into the summer, though, they're going to start to dry out. They're going to start to fall over. And if you, again, are adding water to it and you're watering it because you want to draw from nature more than nature has to provide, then you will miss that there's a cycle of beauty and growth and then withering and decaying. And then by fall, those flowers will fall over on themselves, providing a mulch for the next set of flowers. But again, there's no butterflies. They migrated off and did their thing. This channel really is about working with nature. And again, that's why I mentioned the spiritual and belief system elements, because a good prayer garden with herbs and scents and is going to deliver to you peace and well-being. But if you are angry at the nature of your prayer garden during the fall season and not seeing the natural beauty which is in cycle, then you will have fears and frustrations that are not necessary, and you'll be like, oh, it doesn't work. And you might think this is a little bit extreme, but I have had people come to me and say, you had such beautiful flowers, why did you kill them all? And I'm thinking, well, wait a second. They were beautiful in the spring, and we had some flowers that carried over into the summer, but now it's 90 freaking degrees outside, and these flowers are going to dry out, they're going to mulch, they're going to spread their seed, and they're preparing for the cooler fall. And then in our particular area, we have a very mild winter. It's usually a wet winter. And so if these plants don't have the chance to go to seed and carry out their natural cycle, then we will have no flowers next year. And so it was just strange that this individual was upset, even emotionally distressed over a natural cycle of the seasons. And so again, we're going to talk about those things. I'm going to try to be entertaining and to the point and educational, but in a way that you can go out and do this stuff. But ultimately, we are dealing with a world that doesn't know what is natural. They don't know what food security looks like. They don't know what it means to create an environment that's physically secure. If you've got an environment that has food for bears, so we're doing some natural strips with blackberries and different types of berries and edible soft fruit. If you've got a strip of this stuff 500 feet long in the woods, you will attract bears. So your physical security is important. Now, you'll be growing enough that there's plenty for the bears and there's plenty for people. But ultimately, if you don't understand this cycle, you're going to be in a constant conflict with nature rather than a holistic relationship with nature where you give, nature gives, and ultimately it's symbiotic to a long-term community of both humans, plants, and animals that can just go on forever. There are historical civilizations, and we'll talk about some of those in the programs, that have had hundreds of years on the same land with better production year over year. And they did this without chemical fertilizer. They did this without mechanization, and they did this in abundance. Now, there's a range here. You could be thinking about Monticello, and that's where you want to be. Or you could be thinking about a forest habitat that's full of abundance on the primitive side. It doesn't really matter what range you think. The skill set is the same. And so I'll try to feature both sides of that. But ultimately, I want your success. I want your ability to walk out your back door and have the food and the security and the emotional balance that comes with a natural environment. And I want you to be able to do that whether you've got 1 acre or 500 acres. But again, the content is going to tend for those with 5 acres to 500 acres who own their land, who can do permanent structures or permanent installations. Fruit trees can take 5 years before they'll produce fruit. Soft fruits can do that in about 1.5 years or so. But ultimately, I want you to be able to have security, stability, generational wealth created both in the land and in your personal world. I want you to be able to have the physical security necessary from humans, from animals, from storms and weather. Emergency preparedness is very important. And I will cover a lot of topics, but you ultimately own the topics. I will do videos on the questions that you ask rather than just some editorial schedule, because I'm really every day working. I have a full-time job. I have property projects going on. I have a lot of activities going on. So again, you're not going to get regular videos from me. So make sure you like and subscribe, you put the notification button on, but more importantly, go to the website www.prosperityhomestead.org and you sign up to the newsletter. Again, I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead, and I'm here to help you transform your land into abundance. Very simple. I'll see you in the next video.